We just finished talking about bryophytes, mosses, in the last presentation. And remember, they can only obtain water through osmosis. This limits their size to just a few centimeters tall, and it limits their location to always near water, and they have to be in a shaded area so that they don't dehydrate quickly. For millions of years, plants grew no larger. Then, about 420 million years ago, these mosses were joined by moss-like plants that had vascular tissue that allowed them to grow taller and reproduce without a constant supply of water. These are the seedless vascular plants, otherwise known as ferns and their friends. So get your papers ready and let's take a look at this interesting group. Ferns are classified as seedless vascular plants, and that describes them perfectly. So let's take a look at what exactly ferns are. Let's look at the vascular part first. As you can see from the picture of these new fern leaves, or fronds, uncurling and getting ready to open up, these plants have developed specialized tissue to carry water and nutrients up, down, and around in the plant. You can see the veins that will be the midvein in each frond very well in this picture. Xylem are tubes that carry water upwards to the farthest leaf tip. Since gravity works to pull everything down, specialized cells within the xylem called tracheids have also developed. These cells act like valves to keep water moving upward and not back down. You see the xylem here in the middle of this vein or vascular bundle. They're shown in the purple. So remember, xylem moves water upwards and the tracheids act like valves to keep it moving upwards. And capillary action that we talked about back first semester is why it moves upward. Now, if you remember also from the plant anatomy section, phloem carries food made by photosynthesis, and it works with gravity. Phloem is shown here in the vascular bundle around the xylem in the green. So the xylem shows, this is a cross-section of a leaf. The xylem shows in the pink and the phloem is around it in the green. And together this makes up the vascular bundle. If a plant did not have vascular tissue, how would it get water? That's right, our old friend osmosis. Oh no, not that guy, not Osmosis Jones. Osmosis. Now let's take a look at the seedless part of seedless non-vascular plants. Okay, remember we said that plants have this unique life cycle, the alternating generations or alternation of generations. In a seedless vascular plant or ferns, their dominant stage is the sporophyte. That's what we see 95% of the time when you see ferns. That's the sporophyte stage. Because they're sporophytes, guess what they produce? Spores. Spores. Surprise! They're found on the underside of the fronds, as you see here in this picture. The spores are microscopic, and they're in little containers called sporangia. Okay, and we see lots and lots of little sporangia in this picture. That's a big word for a little container. The sporangia are found in clusters called sori. So it's a small word for a bigger group. And remember, on the underside of the fronds there are several sori containing hundreds of sporangia containing thousands of spores. So the plants are similar to bryophytes in that they produce by means of spores, but unlike bryophytes, they don't need water to move the spores. This happens instead with the wind, but they still need water for the spores to grow. That's why you find ferns in damp places with low light. So these seedless vascular plants have true leaves, stems, and roots with xylem and phloem in them. You might be asking yourself, what are the types of seedless vascular plants? And you know what? I'm really glad you asked. Let's take a look at them. One group are the club mosses. They look like little pine trees and they have scale-like leaves, like you see here in this picture. Another group is horsetails. These have leaves that are in whorls around the stem, and their leaves are kind of scaly. The leaves also contain crystals of silica, and they're commonly called scouring rush because early colonists used them to scour their pots and pans. Pretty cool. Lastly is the largest group, the ferns. These are the ones you're most familiar with. These plants have large, airy fronds that unfurl gracefully, as we saw on the second slide here in this presentation. Ferns are popular plants to grow in hanging pots on patios here in Houston, and they do quite well most of the time. Wonder why? Guess what? It's really humid here, and ferns like humid areas. So that's it for the seedless vascular plants. Let's take a look at what it is we need to remember. If ferns are seedless, how do they reproduce? How are ferns different than mosses? What's the function of vascular tissue? What are the two types of vascular tissue? And what's the advantage of vascular tissue? In other words, why did plants develop vascular tissue in the first place? So, write your summary and write your questions for this group, and be sure you have your notes in class. We have a quiz next week over bryophytes and ferns. See you later, guys.